Hello and welcome to OSW Daily, where each day we discuss the top topics that everyone's talking about related to work, workplace, and employee engagement. And we bring a legendary figures to actually discuss these things. And today I'm happy to have Luc Kamperman. Luc Kamperman's been on the show before, so I always enjoy the conversation. I'm really interested to get some of his perspectives on things we're going to talk about. So what are Luc and I going to talk about today? So driving employee engagement in a crisis, interesting driving. And we're going to go through the article and pull out some questions in this because this article actually talks to specific questions on employee engagement, which is really good. Employee health during the remote work, how is it impacting? Facebook ordering content moderators back to the office. What does that mean? What lessons can we take from that? And then CEOs, they hate Zoom apparently. So let's find out what that means and let's dig into some of this content. But before I do, let me first introduce our esteemed guest today, Luc Kamperman of Elderhoin. Luc, how you doing, sir? Great to have you with us. Legendary Luc, how you doing, sir?
Fantastic. Good morning, Steve. Esteemed. I like that. Yeah. Esteemed out of my bedroom again. Last
There
time I
you
was in the
go.
office.
Well,
But
as we were joking a little bit before, last week you were kicked out into WeWork, so now you're back at your home, and it's good. I'm glad you and your wife are in good terms today, and everything's going well.
I can, there's one tick in the box, allowed to be back at
Good for
home.
you.
Yes.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, more importantly, look, thank you for coming on again. It's always great to talk with you. As I joke and we sort of, we make fun and light of that introduction. But you are someone who I do hold in high esteem. You're one of the first people I always call when it comes to understanding workplace strategy and how to think about it. So, look, I appreciate you coming on. As we sort of think about this, we were just talking offline about work tech. We've both been visiting, are watching, observing, and sort of participating in that. And it was a great show. It's great to see so many great people talking about a very diverse set of topics. I don't know if you have any takeaways on what you thought of that.
It was definitely interesting. I chimed in and out a few times. Picked the different sessions. Of course, I joined the one where I saw you were on
Oh,
stage.
you're too kind. Too kind.
Always keen to hear more from your end as well. Now, it's what strikes me is the still that sort of focus on return to the office, rather than a focus on what is our future way of working
Mm,
that really helps us to deliver on client engagement and have happy clients. It almost feels like that is a bit to the background.
yeah.
And for me, I liked it, but I did miss a little bit of the fundamental questions of during this crisis, how do we want to come out of it? Because what we do and start to do today will have a big impact year after. And my prediction is, and it's just me, a very humble opinion,
Hmm.
that after the health crisis and the economic crisis that we will have without a doubt, I think we will have a big identity crisis. And I think that organizations and the C-suite have to start preparing themselves for that. And I think that is a bigger crisis than maybe the health and the economic crisis that we're all so anxious about at the moment.
So, whenever you're defining an identity crisis, how are you defining it?
For me, identity is you make sense of life in your own context, in the groups that you're part of, in
Mm,
your local community, in your family, in your team at work. We we still, I think, primarily show up at work to connect with other human beings. Yes, we do a job and we get paid for it, etc. But you don't do that for a long time if that is just it, right? That is very much an energy drain. You do that also because you want to grow, you connect with others.
mm,
And now doing that all in the virtual world is different. But then when I hear, and during the work tech as well, and it has been in the news that Facebook is working towards having in the future 50% of their people, fully remote. Well, what does that actually mean? And I can already see. I was just wondering during the work tech, I saw some people with beards and that I hadn't seen
mm.
before.
What do you
And
mean?
No, I'm not referring to you, Steve. Um, but that made me wonder, like, yeah, okay, so people not showing up in the office now every day anymore think like, hey, actually, I want to be different. I want to be something else, and it's just a symptom, right? And maybe I'm, reading into this too much, but I do think that, are people truly able to show up in the way they want to show up, who they are in an authentic way? And if you start to work way more remote, without a doubt, you're going to rethink that. Like now in this past few months, we primarily thought about where do we show up,
Mhm.
right? And there was not much choice. We
Right,
showed up in our
right.
bedroom, like,
Hmm.
today. But if you take that forward into the future, I think that will lead to very different questions. And so the where to live, and people started to leave the city and live elsewhere. Now companies are also thinking like, okay, where do we have offices and where do we have our people? But it's way more than that, right?
Yeah.
It is then the next question is, how do I want to live my life? How
Mm.
do I want to show up? If I do full remote work, I can be your colleague with Nasdaq today, which I'm not. But I could join another one next week. Why
Right.
not? It's I can do that from anywhere. So I think the culture that you want to build going forward is really critical. And when I'm in sessions with some of our clients, I'm a little bit astonished. But I think it's the human being that it is the how can we take, how do we focus on the new normal? Almost like, okay, maybe it's a bit more remote, but how can we keep the rest pretty much all, as it was?
Right.
I think that's like a fundamental thinking problem. How do we really, want to work and perform? And I know, yes, we are in difficult times, and you need to have the psychological safety of for people to show up, and there's a lot of uncertainty. Okay, and yes, that is for leaders and managers the foremost important thing. To ensure that that is there, and that people feel safe to the extent that you can, because we had a quick pre-chat. I'm fully with you, Steve. It's also up to you and me, right?
Right.
How we show up and where we take our responsibility.
Yeah.
But people don't always know how to do that, so you need to guide that a little bit. And one of the clients that I'm working with came up with the mantra now of okay, it's going to be a way of working with choice with responsibility.
Hmm.
Now, they've been pretty good in defining choice, and they've opened up, that can and said, like, hey, that is now really, confirmed by the CEO. That's up to you in the future. Can be anywhere. But how do we make sense of with responsibility? What does that actually mean?
Mm.
It's for me, it's the same like, freedom without boundaries is like anarchy. But autonomy is freedom within boundaries. But what are those boundaries? What is that responsibility for you, for me, for us working in a team? And then what do we want to, have that as an organization? Which may lead to your later question as well, that Facebook is ordering certain groups to
Right.
come back in. But I'll pause here for a moment.
No, look, and I didn't want to interrupt you. I mean, you sent a note on LinkedIn yesterday that you've been feeding up and getting yourself carb loaded for this morning's conversation, and clearly you have. So I think you're coming ready with all guns blazing. But I do want to go back to though whenever you talk about that identity crisis, because in essence, I've been thinking about that more and more. Just as well, one as you were talking, and sort of then correlating that to a few other things. So yeah, we all want our own identity. We're all enjoying this human aspect that we're able to have. You can see the personalities, to your point, the beards. Everyone has a dress code that's very different to what it is in the office. I mean, I'm a shirt and tie and blazer guy every day, and that's just how I roll. But in essence, yeah, there you go, right? I don't know whether you just turn up because that's how you like to work, but you put on your work outfit, and then it is all this. And at home, I've basically just went and bought myself like these like polo shirts so that I know when I put these on, okay, this is game time now, right? But you then went on to say, okay, so the individual may have an identity crisis, but then how does the organization help
Exactly.
employees? How do employees help themselves? And then basically all that culture is drive in the same way. And I think we all have to be intentional, employees, organizations, and have those open conversations to actually help that. Because yeah, it's always we think about, okay, what's the next obstacle? We don't think about the next obstacle. It's, six, seven steps down the road. So it is interesting. And choice with responsibility. I love that. I really do. Because we're all responsible, right? Whether we're a contractor, whether we're an employee, we've made an agreement with the organization. The organization has made an agreement with us. Our responsibility to the organization is to turn up each day ready to go and deliver, execute. And that's sort of the quid pro quo of all employment in the US, right? So it is really, but I love the choice with responsibility. In other words, if you want to be here or you want to be there, that's your choice. You're still responsible. So it is a great thing, and then freedom
Yeah.
without boundaries, man.
And people struggle with that, Steve.
Yeah,
And
no,
and
yeah,
I'm not going to say here that I've got the perfect answer or solution for that. But um, if everybody has that choice, then when do we show up at the office again? Is that fully an individual choice? Do we, decide that as a team? But I've heard people saying like, no, now I've been given the choice.
yeah,
So in the future, there's no one, not even my manager, and they start to refer to hierarchy, who's going to mandate me to be there. That's my choice then. And so it really is interesting because there's way more in different aspects of how people make those decisions now. Whereas in the past it was, I wouldn't say it was simple, but it was less dimensional. Let's put it that way, at least. And that starts to bring up like, hey, how do you, for example, want to build team culture? And I can even speak for myself. I have a team of 8, Steve, and I am keen. I love the idea of getting back together, even not in the office, but like, could we do something in nature and go for a walk? Um, but now people are in different places, so there's more of that logistics, and not everybody is, at the same level of excitement about that idea. So how do you do that? Because pre-COVID, I felt it was a bit more clear, right?
yeah.
Like we do that. It's like a team day, and so it's yeah, it's interesting to say the least.
No, 100%. And I want to go back to one of the first things you said and then come to the second element because I think they're both important things. When we talk about, okay, the choice is, do I want to go in the office or do I want to go in the office? Well, the organization tells me to go in or they don't tell me to go in, I'm going to make a personal choice, right? The organization is going to make a personal choice about you as well if you're not delivering in the environment that you're choosing to work. So in essence, we each individually have that decision to make. Am I delivering for the company who is employing me, or if I'm not? And I hold that responsibility myself, but my responsibility is to the employer because I've chosen to work and deliver for them whenever I accepted that contract. So there is that shift as well. The second
Yeah.
point about getting people together in nature, I love that actually. And I sort of think about the many with volunteer days right within many organizations, and those are really getting out. They're going to a park, whatever that is, and you take that element and then you run with that. And I think for teams to come together in that open environment where it is at a local park, it is where people can be social distanced outside, where more people feel comfortable being outside than inside, I think is a really good thing. Unfortunately, we're about to head into the winter, so I don't know how good that would feel. But in essence, but those who are in southern states, I think it's a great idea. You know.
Helicopter coming over. Sorry.
Ah, okay.
Uh,
Yeah, they're about to pick you up, take you to your
yeah,
hike with your colleague.
yeah. It's my daily commute now.
There you go. There you
Uh,
go. I love it. I love it.
yeah. Now, and
Wow.
and and the other thing about what you touched on, Steve, is the indeed what are you responsible for? Like, because you're still part of an organization, right?
Hmm.
And you've got a contract, right? You've got at least an agreement to perform in a certain way and to deliver results. And I think that is now the opportunity what I was referring to, that I think really teams should start thinking about what does productivity mean for us? What does a high performing team actually mean to us? And how can we then start to live up to that? And of course, that is within the realm of the whole organization. But I think that's, probably the starting point, because you have to deliver things and you rely on each other,
Yeah.
because you're a team for a reason. And what I also do think then is, how can we help people to measure their own performance more? So we all know that with AI and data, there's huge opportunities coming in. How can we um, how can we bring that data to the end user level? That I know for myself if I'm performing well or not, rather than a manager who has to tell me, yeah, if I've done great or not. And more of that data is there, right? So how can we share insights and bring that to teams and to individuals to help them to rethink how we actually work? And a very practical example of that, that came up in a workshop I had with a client last week, was around synchronous and asynchronous ways of working. And I think it's becoming a really interesting topic.
Yeah.
Like, what are the things that we really have to do real time together? And what are things that we don't have to do, and allow each other to have some focus time to do individual work, and that we can build on, from each other. And so fundamentally rethinking some of our processes and how we do things. I think that's really the beauty of this. Now, of course, again, you need to have the mindset to be ready for that and to be open minded. But people literally were saying, Steve, like, oh, but that means we need to rethink, how we. And yep, yep, that is indeed,
And
and
coaching is important in that. You know what I mean? Because in essence, people, most teams are really good at this synchronized. We're in a room, we're on a whiteboard, and we're doing whatever. That asynchronized, what you're talking about, where individuals do their own little piece, that is a complete mind shift, because that means the individual, again, we go back to taking responsibility, personal responsibility, has to take responsibility and manage their own schedule to then go and deliver and look at this, give themselves that thinking time. Whereas often we can come together as a team and collectively we switch on to the task at hand, where the asynchronized means, okay, individually we have to do our own little pieces at a time. That takes coaching, it takes discipline, and it's
absolutely.
not easy.
Yeah, and it plays into one of the other articles that you sent, Steve, which is
Every,
the CEOs who get fatigue of Zooms and who
yeah.
start to really hate it. Um, and I read that article, and it makes sense to me. If you have all these Zoom meetings, and there is evidence though, that data is showing that we do more but shorter meetings generally. Um, but we have more of them, right? So the amount of time that we're in meetings is has decreased a little bit, but generally is sort of still there. And I'm with one of the CEOs. I think it was from Microsoft actually, who said, like, then you start your morning, you're in the first Zoom, and within 30 minutes, you already Zoom out. Actually, you start to, and I think that is truly a thing that we did for the first few months, but that's something we should be mindful of. And focus time and more one-on-one time, I think, is essential. Sitting in these meetings with 8, 10, 15 people, and then people talking over each other, and even because in the virtual world it is just more difficult to feel like your contribution and where you should step in or not. So the chances that people just sit there and put up a screensaver of themselves like they are attending, but just go and make coffee.
Uh,
I think that's real.
no, no, of course it's real. But does that is that so different than when you're sitting in a meeting? People don't daydream, right? Of course they do, right? And that happens. That people check their email. People are multitasking all the time, whether you're in a room or not. And the difference whenever
Yeah.
you're doing it on Zoom is you don't physically see them switching off to check their email. You don't, I mean, it's well, we're getting to know whenever people look in certain directions because the Zoom has the bar down one side. You can tell if people are engaged because they're looking at that. Or if they're looking over the other way, then okay, they're doing other things, right? And the moment we're able to learn to tell these different things. What I find interesting though is I would have assumed these CEOs are in meetings all day long anyway. So whether they're in person, I guess they get to move, and maybe that's different. It's a change of environment. They're not having to do it at the same place at home or somewhere else. I just find it interesting. I do find more meetings are on the calendar for sure. I do find they tend to start on time and end on time, usually because we're back to back. But at the same time, it's like, I sit down at whatever time it is in the morning, to prepare for this. And I know I don't move from here till 7 o'clock at night. And I have to force myself to get up to move and take those few minutes. So the opportunities that I get to take a call where I can walk, be it listen to a town hall, listen or a meeting that I'm not going to be participating in heavily, but I want to listen to, then I will take those opportunities to go for a walk. So I agree that what they're saying is real. It's happening, absolutely. But I think there's other reasons. I don't think anyone who's going to be participating in a meeting is going to be the one that may be going to a bathroom.
Hmm. Yeah, and I hear that.
Yeah.
And pre-COVID, I think again that to me is part of how do we work? How do we actually meet? Within our organization or within our teams, and be really clear on what's the agenda of the meeting. What is your role? What is the expected contribution? And then, if not, you should have the right to say like, "Hey, I'm not showing up in this meeting, or I'm only showing up to listen in."
Mm-hmm.
Just to be more clear on what we do in these meetings and what we take away from it. So good meeting etiquette
Yeah.
and making them productive, I think, is and I'm with you. That was pre-COVID. That is now. The only difference I would say, Steve, is that in those meetings where you are in person, body language, etc., and to almost tap someone on the shoulder and to it's easier to deal and interact with that than in a Zoom with 15 or 20 people where you just hardly see if someone is tuned in or out. But that is again, that is facilitation and meeting skills,
Mm-hmm.
right? Think about how can I lead this meeting with proactively having people to participate, to proactively reach out to the ones that you haven't heard from yet. But if you do it all sort of by default, I think it can be an energy drain.
No, no, I can. And we haven't even pulled up any of these pieces of content that we're going to talk about. We've just been going through. So, and I just sort of kick the questions because in essence we're actually coming close to the time. But in essence, I do want to ask a couple of questions that I did have. So, how do we help team members stay engaged? Right, when they're facing a crisis, right? There's the emotional, there's the social, there's the mental strains of today. How do employees themselves, right? The article was all about how do you ensure employees, but I want to take it from and sort of spin the responsibility because it first starts with you as the person. What sort of guidance would you give for that?
Yeah, I think um, yeah, I think it's a good point, Steve. We should take care of each other, right? If we talk about self-learning teams and self-managing teams, etc., the emphasis on the manager is interesting, and that's another whole topic
Yeah.
that I wonder if is this new world that we're entering and creating for ourselves. Is there place for like command and control and a strong voice of a manager? Are we are we not moving even in an accelerated way towards more self-managing teams? And then you read a lot about as a manager, your first objective is to show kindness and compassion for your employees and to going through these uncertain times, but we can do that for each other,
Mm.
right? And so why don't you take, in that sense, then the responsibility to have more one-on-ones here and there with your team members? Check in with each other,
Right.
hear about what others are working on, and then get to those aha moments that you could have at the coffee machine or the water cooler. But you have to be deliberate in that, right? It's just not automatically happening as it used to be. And so I would say really taking some of that, personal connections with your team members, and if you show that to others, I think they will show that back to you, and not just show up in a lot of meetings like in team meetings, because that's not where it's happening. There's even I think there was a Microsoft article, and um, I actually, got myself trained in starting to use the workplace analytics platform from Microsoft. I think that's one of the tools that is really fascinating, interesting, in how you can bring data to life for teams and for individuals. But I'll put that aside for now. But I think it shows already that managers who have more one-on-ones are better engaged and have better engaged employees. But is that just a manager, task? Can we not, do that ourselves if we think about a self-managing team? But
Mm.
then you have to be a bit proactive. And how do you reach out to that person that you're not connected with, so much as in the past? And yeah, that takes an effort, but I would really invite you to do that.
Yeah, no, and it is important. Yeah, those connections in the past. It's yeah. I mean, I've found myself reaching out to people more and more, just like a quick hello, how you doing, and it feels good. It does feel good. But when you talk about the responsibility, the way to do it, and sort of more one on ones, you know, those folks who are entering into the workforce who maybe don't have the ability, may not get a lot of management one on ones because just at their level or where they're coming in, they're probably the ones that need it the most. When you're, do you think?
Mm, yes.
Just because, and
It's
it's like,
it's
I don't know about you, but it's just like I sort of think about it because as you're talking, I'm replaying situations that I've experienced, situations I've heard about, and what people have said to me, and I'm going, these are the folks that probably need it the most, but actually they're probably the least likely
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. Yeah, I think the companies who already were good in onboarding people before COVID,
Mm-hmm.
they probably found ways to do that in a good way now as well, right? I think we're pretty creative and
Yeah,
inventive in
yeah.
finding ways. So I think if you struggle with that, and this is not per se the answer, but you probably struggled with that pre-COVID as well. Like, just saying to somebody in let's say in an open plan environment, like, hey, this is your team, by the way, and this is your desk, and yeah, and here's your laptop, and good luck. You can feel really lost in that team. So how did you do onboarding then? How can you still do that now in the virtual world? And how, yeah, that might take a little bit more effort to bring people on board. I've seen it within my organization that people joined literally like in March, or yeah, that is not easy. But I would say it's also um, it depends on several things. What is it that you're doing in the organization? What is the performance that you have to deliver? If you have that clear, if you have your purpose clear, it's all the basic things again.
Mhm.
Then onboarding should not be such an issue. But if onboarding was a lot about sitting next to someone and really telling exactly what they have to do, etc., yeah, that will be quite a different experience, and more difficult to do that in the virtual remote way.
No, well, look, it's our time is way over. So like, thank you. We didn't even go through half the stuff we want to talk about. The conversation just naturally went, so I didn't want to interrupt it. It flowed nicely. So Thank you, folks. If you did, listen, do reach out to Luc. He is a source of great knowledge. Is very responsive, and it always provides great guidance. And also, if you like the interview, please hit that like button, hit that notification bell, subscribe so that you're alerted to all upcoming videos. We do go live 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. Eastern. And also, if you want to check out opensourceworkplace.com, the website where we have a lot of content, text, photo, video, find your co-working locations, find out our service providers, everything's on the site. So do go check it out. But look, it's been so good to talk to you again, and I look forward to catching up very soon.
Happy Wednesday, and see you.